I would like this morning to advocate for the pause button. Not just on my DVR, not just on my Roku. I would like a pause button for life in general. Wouldn't that be great? Sometimes the week is just too much. Most weeks I've got to turn off the TV news. For some reason, I torture myself by reading the entire Washington Post every morning over my coffee, and I really need to stop because this week alone we've had what? We learned that racism is alive and well thanks to Roseanne Barr. Thank you so much. We've got North Korea trolling our president with giant envelopes to make his hand look tiny and is buying right into it. We've learned that the president's lawyers are arguing that he cannot obstruct justice. Elsewhere in the world, the leader of a Southern Baptist seminary was fired finally after weeks for mishandling allegations of sexual assault on his campus and comments he's made about women. It took months for that to happen. We're apparently entering into a trade war with Canada. Here at home, a family of a man shot by the police a few years back was awarded a whopping $4 for their pain and suffering. And at the border, we've got children being separated from their families as they try to enter the country. And here at home, the winds are up and the fire conditions are terrible. I'm starting to wonder if it's not time to pack a go bag for myself. And oh my God, pause. Can we just stop? It's too much. There's so much. And for we open-hearted people, it starts to hurt after a while. Like soul hurt, right? Like physically hurt. I thought maybe I was having a heart attack at one point this week. It hurt. And this week, ironically enough, when I wanted to talk about resilience and bouncing back from things, this week just turned into an I don't want a week. I'm not kidding. I came to my office and I sat and I tooled around playing games on the internet and I thought about this sermon and I just did not wanna. I just shut down. We need to have that pause. There's just too much to deal with. In the church world, in the spiritual world, the word we are talking about for this pause is retreat. It could be a physical place. It could just be an act of doing something, of stepping out of that time, stepping out of that world, taking a break from it all so we can just pause, slow down, figure out what we are doing next. We need to take that pause from time to time. But we don't let ourselves do that easily. Retreat. We get tied up in the military sense of that word sometimes as human. We think we are withdrawing, ceding territory, running away from things, taking a weak action. Retreat. And so we don't do it. After all, I don't have it so bad, really. Somewhere, someone is in much more pain than I am. Somewhere there is someone who is feeling emptier than I do. Somewhere there is something that always needs fixing. Somewhere there is somebody or somebodies who need us more than I need to take care of myself. What's going on in here ain't so bad in comparison. It's a terrible trick we play on ourselves. Because on the one hand, it's true. Somebody somewhere probably does have it worse than we do. And yet, at the same time, that doesn't negate the realness of whatever it is we're feeling in the moment, in that moment of being overwhelmed by everything. That running on empty feeling is visceral and real in the moment. That pain we might be feeling at everything going on in the world is visceral in that moment. And we feel it deeper than anything else anyone might be feeling. And so we need to take that time to pause. We need to be able to retreat. And that retreat is not a surrender. It's not a ceding of any territory. It's not running away from anything. It is a moment where we realize that we can have compassion for ourselves. And we are a compassionate, open-hearted people, but that compassion starts at home, here. It is a muscle we need to be able to exercise and to flex, this compassion. And so we have to start with ourselves, that heart muscle, the metaphysical one. To retreat is to recognize the pain and the emptiness that we are feeling in the face of the world, in the face of our daily lives, and being able to be compassionate to ourselves. That compassion drives our open-hearted selves, and it's what's drained from us when we live out a life open-hearted to the rest of the world. We can't maintain it if we're not kind to ourselves in the process. And the more we can take a pause to be compassionate to ourselves, to behave as though we are on our own side for once, and after all, somebody has to be. The more we can do that, the more we build our capacity to finally be compassionate to others. To retreat is to take a moment to be on our own side. Stop for a minute and think. Do you remember what it feels like when somebody was on your side? Do you remember what that did for your heart and your soul? What a gift to be able to pause, to step back for a second, to be on your own side, to feel that compassion for yourself again. To recognize once and for all that that exposed nerve that is getting frayed the more and more we engage with the world is feeling really tender, that the situation is too much. So we pause. We retreat. It could be a physical place that we go to. It could just be a mental state, our happy place. It could be that moment when we're just full of rage and despair, when we can say to ourselves, hey, big guy, the sun's getting low in the sky. Thank you, some of you, for picking up on that. That happy place that you need to go to. It sounds ridiculous, but it is a place we need to go to, a place we build for ourselves. Not a fortress, not with sturdy walls, just a tent, something we can pop up easily when we need it and take down just as easily again because it needs to come down again after a while. And we'll get into that in a moment. Because we need to retreat, but we cannot stay in our retreat forever. There is work. But the pause, the retreat, is not enough on its own. It's not enough just to remove oneself from stress, to just wall oneself off from the world. The gospel from Mark that I shared this morning is actually the gospel being read in most of our Christian churches here this week. It is the selected text for the week. How fortuitous that Jesus is talking about Sabbath and what it is made for. In Jesus' time, especially amongst the Pharisees of his time, the purpose of Sabbath was to live by the letter of the law, of course, to stop work completely, to do nothing, to just Stop work. Don't do anything that resembles work. Don't lift a finger. It is the day of rest. And yet here we find Jesus and his disciples wandering through a cornfield for some reason on a Sabbath. And his disciples just kind of absent-mindedly picking grains of corn as they walk. Kind of destructive. But I've done that in a grass field before, haven't you? Just kind of pop the heads off of things. And there are the Pharisees, and put aside the question, what are the Pharisees doing out and about in a cornfield on the Sabbath? It's a story. And they're watching this and saying, hey, that's work. You're not supposed to be doing that. What do you think you're doing? And Jesus being Jesus, a really funny guy. If you read the Gospels with the right lens, the dude is hysterical. Answers the question with another question, a complete non sequitur. What do you think you're doing? Hey, have I ever told you about the time that David and his friends were hungry? So they just walked into the temple and they took the bread the priest had and they started to eat it. What? David and his friends were hungry, so they did what they needed to do to feed themselves. David and his friends were feeling soul hungry. The text literally says bread of the presence is what is sitting in the temple. They're soul hungry. They walk in and they eat the bread of the presence. They did what they needed to do to fill themselves. And here we are with this non sequitur from Jesus, and what he's really asking is, what's the point of rest in the first place, guys? Is it to just freeze in time for a day? Or is it to recharge those batteries? What is the point of the pause but to fill yourself with what you need to get through the rest of the week? And then just to bring the point home, in the immediate text after that, he goes and heals a man's withered hand in the synagogue, just to hammer it home a little bit. Because if what you need in that moment is to heal the sick, go for it. The Sabbath was made for humankind to recharge, to fill ourselves with what we need. Do what you have to do to fill yourself up. Remember what it is that feeds your soul and recharge. Back when I took my first sabbatical, and I say first sabbatical because there'll be another one coming, I started to engage with a spiritual director who asked me what it was I was looking to do, and I said I needed to rediscover joy in my life because I had completely lost that sense and that capacity in my day-to-day work. I didn't know what it meant to feel joyful in what I do, to enjoy what I do, to be fed by the thing I'm called to do. It's kind of a problem for a minister. I needed to rediscover joy, what fed me, what filled my soul so I could do the work. And so I started to delve back into writing practice and creative practices and learning how to just be present to the life around me instead of building up that fortress of a pause around myself that cut me off from the world rather than just giving me a break from it. So that I could learn how to enjoy myself and my work again, so that I could find joy, which in light of the world today sounds maybe like a frivolous response. Joy? There's so much darkness in the world. There's so much going wrong. How can you dare to stop for a moment and feel joyful about anything? And the answer is that's the natural progression from when we feel compassion for ourselves, or we can take that break to step away from whatever it is that is emptying us out and causing us pain. It is okay to feel joy in the midst of all the darkness, because otherwise, when the light returns, how are you going to remember how to do it? How to feel joyful? It's an easy trap to fall into, forgetting joy, forgetting what fills you, because there is so much going on. I do not engage in my writing practice probably on the regular basis in the way that I should, in a way that fills me, to the point where a few weeks ago I finally took a day off on my day off, and yes, I know, and sat down to write, and I opened up a short story I had started and realized that the last time I had opened that up was a year ago. And then I started to kick myself. Oh, geez, I'm so bad at my practice. I'm just letting it all go. And then I start shoulda-ing myself, and then I have even less energy to pick up the practice, and I don't pick up the practice, so I kick myself over here for not doing what I should do to fill myself, and it's this awful downward spiral. And I need to pause, because I'm creating my own downward spiral of some darkness here for myself, punishing myself for not doing what I think I should be doing to fill myself so I can do what I should be doing. You see where we go here? I need to pause, to take that moment to feel compassion for myself, some kindness to myself. To stop saying, you should have done that, you should have done this. Now is a new moment. Here is the start. How are you going to carry yourself forward? How are you going to fill yourself now? How are you going to rediscover joy now? How are you going to rebuild your capacity now? Do the thing now. Do what you need to do to fill your soul. Do what fills you. Take joy in it, and be mindful of it while you're doing it. Remember how it feels to do that thing, because that memory will carry you too. That memory will feed you even when you can't be doing the thing exactly. Because what is the point of rest if not to fill and renew your open heart? So what all of this is really leading to is this sense of resilience. It's a complicated word, it's a complicated topic. I am barely skating across the surface of it today. Resilience, it's this elasticity of the soul, elasticity of our psyche, our ability to bounce back from adversity, to marshal our personal resources and build the capacity to renew ourselves so that we continue to engage with the world around us and not completely retreat into a cocoon or a fortress. And there's a lot of skills involved in it, more than what I'm talking about today. And it's easier for some, and it's harder for others. And some of us might need a little extra help in building up that capacity for resilience. But I focus on these two pieces this morning because it's my observation of humanity in general that this is what we have the hardest time with as a species, letting ourselves take a break from the world. Getting off the endless cycle of the rat race and the go, 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 to give ourselves a chance to renew and rebuild what's within us. To do something, and yeah, I'm going to use the word selfish. to take care of ourselves and fill our souls with the things that feed us. The more we do it, the easier it becomes and the more capacity we have to give to one another. Neurophysiology is starting to find that our brains and our emotional capacity works a lot like a muscle. The repeated firing of our neurons is like the repetition of a lifted weight when we are firing our neurons for the purpose of things like finding joy and taking rest and feeling compassion for ourselves and others. We build our capacity the more that we do it, and we have to start at home. And that ability to pause, that ability to retreat, and that ability to recharge ourselves are the areas, I think, of real struggle for most of us. We struggle giving ourselves a break, and we need to do it with more frequency. That it is, after all, why the Sabbath happens once a week. And I highly advocate for taking a Sabbath, even if it's not a Sunday. Today is not my Sabbath. If you notice, I am working. But the Sabbath is just one day out of the week. And the reason it is only one day is that God, my handwriting is terrible. The reason is that retreat is not a fortress. It is a tent. It is something we have to collapse and be able to pack up again and return to the world. We have to go back to the world with whatever it is we have built up in our reserves and our capacity. It's the whole meaning of that elasticity of the soul and the psyche. It's got to bounce back to something. And where it's bouncing back to is our engagement with everyone else, the return of our open hearts to the world that needs them. Our capacity for compassion, built and flexed up repetition after repetition, could lead us nowhere else but to that outside world again. Because what good is the open heart if it's not open to someone or something? What else can an open-hearted people do but return to the world, knowing finally at last their capacity for compassion, for resolve, for stick-to-itiveness, all of these things are renewable resources. What's within us will flow freely from out of our open hearts to the world around us, and the world is waiting for what we have to give to them. And when the reserves hit the low points, we know we can pause without guilt, without regret, recharge and rebuild what we need to within us, because the world will still be there, waiting for us to return.